All right, so I am here today to talk to you about my April reading recap. And I read a lot this month because I took part in the Battle of the Bands Readathon and with the Bookish Drummer, and read all 20 books, plus 1.5 other books. Well, maybe 2. I'm recording this on the 30th, so we shall see. All right, so I'm going to just kind of quickly go through what the prompts were, talk about the books, and then I'll show you the kind of overall wrap-up. So for the 70s, and again, the way this works is we gain points for our team, and then we take points away from other teams. So I was on Team 80s. All right, so Team 70s, the first one was Play That Funky Music, which is a book with a funky, weird, or striking cover. 2 is Hooked on a Feeling, so immediately binge the next book in a series. 3, American Pie, a book by a popular American author. 4, Stuck in the Middle with You, the second book in a trilogy or the middle book in a series. And 5 is Blinded by the Light, a book with a character who is blinded by their ambition. And I did follow my original TBR for this, so I didn't have to swap anything out. So for Play That Funky Music, the funky cover, I picked Knock Knock Open Wide, which is an arc I'd had for a long time. And this didn't really work for me. It's really well written though, so like I'm definitely interested, and I would read something else by this writer, but it's very heavy on like Celtic mythology, and I just don't think I know enough about like Irish folklore and Celtic mythology to understand what was kind of going on here. And so a lot of the stuff that was like interesting really wasn't, I'm not really into like this kind of horror anyway. And then I just didn't really like get it, because I'm sure it means something to, people who know a lot about this, the culture and the mythology. So, I mean, it was well written. So if that's something that interests you, you probably like it. I just feel like I don't know enough to really, truly appreciate it. So for the next book in a series, I did The Vanishing Stair. I'll talk about all of these at the end of this, because I did 3 for the same series. So this is book 2 in the Truly Devious series, is The Vanishing Stair. And I'll come back to that. And then for an American author, I did Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, which was one of my Sir Chonk picks as well. This is really good, but it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be creepy. I thought it would be like about a carnival. And I mean, I guess it kind of is, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. And so like, I love Dandelion Wine. Dandelion Wine is one of my favorite books of all time. It's super, like, kind of, like, painful, but also beautiful. And it's about, nostalgia and kind of growing up, but also, like, that kind of feeling of summer and, how you remember things a certain way. And this has kind of similar themes, and I think it's actually set in the same town. But as opposed to the sort of like bittersweet nostalgia of summer, this is fall. And so it's sort of like the dark, sort of dreary nihilism of growing up. So it's kind of like Catcher in the Rye and Dandelion Wine were like combined into one with a carnival theme. And it was just way more depressing than I expected. Which normally I like, but I just felt like it was sort of like, I don't know, like, his writing's so beautiful that I just don't know that it didn't really click for me. And also, I mean, it's a lot about, like, a boy and his father, obviously the boy and his friend, parts, how, like, they'll be friends, they'll always be friends, but will they? I mean, obviously it's, like, kind of like a Stand By Me feel, Stand By Me has more of a Something with a Wicked This Way Comes feel. So I definitely liked it. And it's one of those things that I feel like maybe in like 2 years, I'll like rate it higher, as I think more about it. I think I just went into it thinking it was going to be something different. I thought I was going to get like a kind of creepy Halloween story, and it was really more of just like a really like depressing look at like how much growing up sucks. So it wasn't what I was anticipating. But it's well written, obviously. It's Bradbury, so it's amazing. And then for the third book out of a series of 5, I have Hand in the Wall, which is part of Truly Devious. And then for the fifth, for this team, I had Truly Devious, which is the first book. So this series is really, really fun. I guess books 4 and 5 are the same characters, but not set at the same school. So this trilogy is absolutely a trilogy. And I think books 4 and 5 are standalone. 4 is at like a camp, and I think 5 is in London. And I guess it is have a cliffhanger, but these like clearly are not done. So like if you read book 1 or you read book 2, it just ends in the middle of the story. So do not, like, it's not like one of those, it's a series, so like Harry Potter, where certain story arc element, like certain arcs wrap up and certain ones are left kind of open. No, it like is literally mid-story. Like we don't get the conclusion of the main story and the mystery until book 3. So if you are going to read the series, which I recommend, I really enjoyed it, but if you're going to read this series, make sure you have books 1 through 3 like available, because otherwise you'll be really annoyed. So it is a YA series, and it's about like this girl who she goes to this like school. It's one of those like, oh, we have a school with no grades, you know. I mean, they have grades, but you know, everyone has kind of their thing, and so her thing is she's like really obsessed with like true crime and like solving crimes. And there was a major crime in history that took place at the school that was never solved, and so that's what she wants to do. She wants to go to the school and she wants to solve it. And one thing I really liked about this series is that very rarely in like YA mysteries and thrillers, I feel like very rarely do they manage to make the character who's a teen, who's kind of the sleuth, you know, make them kind of obviously the protagonist and the hero of the story without sort of minimizing all of the adults. Like usually the adults are just either a bunch of idiots or they're like not paying any attention. They don't know what's going on. And this kind of has, like, if you like Wednesday, you might like this because it has kind of a similar feel where like the adults aren't, you know, they're not stupid. They're not, you know, they're involved, but it's a boarding school. So, you know, they're not like watching the kids 24/7, and I mean they are, you know, but like on campus. So I liked that because I liked that there were adults involved and they weren't like all a bunch of like bumbling oafs, and they weren't all like corrupt and evil. Like, you know, it just, they worked, and it worked realistically, but also gave her, you know, the ability to kind of do a bunch of the stuff herself. And so I liked that. And another thing I really liked about this is, and I like Maureen Johnson's writing. I liked The Name of the Star. I didn't finish that series, because I liked the first one, and then just, it started getting a little more supernatural than I liked. And then I love 13 Little Blue Envelopes, not a mystery, but I love that book. So I was like, I like Maureen Johnson, so I'll probably like it, but, she does a really good job. The character has anxiety, and she has panic attacks, and it's very well done, you know, and that's something that very few writers seem to be able to pull off. Like, her anxiety is always there. She doesn't like, we don't have to hear about it 24 hours a day, you know, it's not like constantly there, but it's also like there when it, you know, it would be. And it's also not like consistent, which is how it is, you know. So like there are times when she's in the middle of something where you would think she would have a panic attack, and she even comments like, I'm fine. And then she'll randomly have a panic attack at a really inopportune time, or sometimes at a time that doesn't make any sense. And it's realistic, and so she talks about it, but like, it's not her entire identity, but it is still always present for her. And so I thought that was well done too. So I really liked the series. I thought it was really fun. I found the characters very engaging. The first book, it took me a little bit because there was one character in particular that was a little too, like, quirky for my taste. Like, I was just like, But, I mean, again, if you like Wednesday, like, I think you'd like it. So even, like, with the quirkiness, obviously it's not as dark as Wednesday, but it is pretty dark. I mean, there's, like, murder and, and there's 2 timelines because there's obviously the original crime, although that's mostly in, like, interviews and, articles and stuff. So there are a few things that are kind of parallel, but it's not, like, half and half or anything. The main story is the current day. And the other thing, the thing that, like, stopped me from giving the entire series a 5, like, the first one, I was like, I liked where this is going, but I hate cliffhangers. And like I said, some of the characters were a little too quirky. I liked, the second book was my favorite, because I thought everything was really well done in it, minus the cliffhanger. And then I liked the ending, like, it worked well, and I liked where the story went. I liked all the characters, but there, like, were major editing issues, like, ridiculous editing issues. So, like, words used wrong. So at one point she went to see, like, I think it was like a physic instead of there was a physic instead of a psychic. And then at one point they were having a conversion instead of a conversation. And I was like, okay, this is like a major publisher. There is no excuse for this. And she's like a New York Times bestselling author. And I'm not faulting the author because, I mean, obviously I know when you're writing, you're typing fast. This is not her responsibility. Like, these are typos. Like, 100% this is on the editing and the proofreading. I mean, they're supposed to be, her editor, her copy editor, her proofreader. There are too many people involved in traditional publishing for those to have gone missing, not gotten caught. And then there's also, like, some serious, like, continuity errors. And again, I'm not blaming the author because, like, there's one point where one of the characters starts dealing cards. And I was like, when did they start playing cards? And then, like, a page and a half later, they decide to play cards. So obviously when she was, like, rewriting, she went and, like, moved some of the plot around. But I feel like someone should have caught that. Like, that's the editor's job. But that's not the author's job. The author is, like, focusing on the story. So, again, these things are unacceptable, I feel like, in book 3 of a major series by a major publisher, by a New York Times bestselling author, and I just think it's appalling. Like, I would be so angry if it was my editor, and I also just think it's really insulting to readers, like, because people pay for books, and, like, if you went and saw a movie, and, like, in the middle of the movie, they accidentally put, like, the dailies from another movie or something, or a scene from, if they had those kind of editing mistakes in a film, you would be annoyed. I mean, actually, Sir Chonk and I went to see, I think it was Gothica with Halle Berry, and when we went to see it, the boom mic was in all the shots, and so we were like, okay, and it was very distracting, and it obviously was supposed to be like a creepy movie, and the whole time we're just like, you could see her talking into the boom mic. It was ridiculous. And again, I was annoyed, and so we ended up getting our money back because we were like, this is not like a finished product. And it's kind of frustrating because, I mean, again, this is not new. Obviously, any of you who are gamers, like, it's not new for people to be like, oh, here, give us money, and we will give you an incomplete product. But I just think that's, it's like, it's bad enough, when people do it with self-publishing, but you're like, okay, they don't have the resources. It's just, I don't know. It really, really annoyed me. Anyway, so I love the series, but I'm very angry about the editing. And so this is something I feel like should not be a thing. It just should not, that should not have happened. All right, so that's the 70s. I'm going to come back. I have to break this into like the time, the different teams. So I'll come back, and I'll come back with some of the other ones. All right, bye. Okay, I'm back. So we are at the 80s. This was my team. So this is the next group. So the first of the prompts was Take On Me, a book that you're scared to take on. 7 is Maniac, a book you can binge in 1 or 2 sittings. 8 was Never Gonna Give You Up, and it was Rickroll, roll a die to determine the length of your next read. 9 was The Safety Dance, a book that's a safe bet, you'll enjoy it. And 10 was Don't You Forget About Me, a book you've wanted to read for a long time but still haven't. So my 2 favorites of the month were both in this group. So we'll go through that. So the first one I did was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is the book I was afraid to take on. And the reason I was afraid to take this on is the same reason I haven't read it for the 20 years that I've had it. And it's just really long and super intimidating. So I have the hardcover version, and I think it's like 8 something, or 9 something, and the paperback's like 1,000 and something, or 11 something. And I'm not like a big long book person, partially just because I feel like very few books need to be long. And then I also I'm like, okay, there are 3 books I could be reading right now. So I decided I would take this on because it was one of the ones Sir Chonk gave me for the year. I've had it for 20 years, and I thought it would be a good fit for something I was intimidated by. The thing is, it was probably not the smartest decision to do a book this long as part of a readathon. So I started the month with it, and then by towards the end of the first week, I was like, okay, it's going to take me half the month to read this, just doing this. So what I ended up doing was I had read 30%. So then I went and I read another book, and then I'd read, another 5-10%. And then at the end of the month, I had done all my other prompts. So I had a few days left. And so I had 40% left to go. Or almost 50%, but then I could just focus on this because I knew I didn't have to, I wasn't letting anyone down, and this was all I had left. So, I loved this book. This is definitely on, my favorite books of all time. The only thing I can say bad about it is that I wasted 20 years not reading it. I loved it. I loved every page of it. I loved everything about it. It's fantastic. It is everything I would naturally like. So it's written it's set during the early 1800s in England. And so it's written kind of like books of that era. So that 3-volume novel kind of thing. It's got Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, that writing style, the Brontes. So, I love that writing style. I love that time period. That's one of my favorite time periods. I would say Victorian England, or, just right before the Victorian era. I just really love that time period. So that alone, I just like the time period. You put people in hats and all these manners they have to deal with, and then the sort of Britishiness. I love that. It's super, super funny, but it's funny in a way that I really love. It's definitely my kind of humor, but it's a very subtle sort of I would say British humor, but also sort of a so Sir Chonk said it's not laugh out loud funny. I was laughing out loud hysterically through the whole book, but it's not the kind of thing that I guess normally you would consider comedy. But for instance, there's one point where he's describing this place and how dreary it is, and nothing on earth is so dreadful and dreary, and he was like, is this, have we reached a point of hell or something? And someone's like, no, it's Scotland. And so, like, that makes me laugh. But, like, it's that kind of subtlety. And I think that's hilarious. But, I mean, obviously it's not for everyone. It is long, and it feels long. I mean, that covers a ton of time. There's a lot that happens. So it is a fairly, like, it doesn't feel, it's weird. It doesn't feel like a chore to read, but it's definitely, you can feel that it's long. Like, you're like, okay, I've been reading this, and, like, tons of stuff has happened, and I'm only 30% into the book. You don't even meet Jonathan Strange until almost 30% of the way into the book, and so, you know, that, like, just to kind of give you a sense, like, it feels long, but I absolutely loved it. This was so fantastic, and I had, like, the worst book hangover after this book, because, like, once it was over, I was, like, really sad it was over. And so one of the nice things about being able to kind of take breaks, like, right now I've been reading Lord of the Rings for months because I don't like it. And so I kind of just am like, I'll just suffer through a chapter or two. This was different. Like, I would go to read something else, but I couldn't wait to get back to it. But I also, like, was glad I took the whole month because I really didn't want it to end. I mean, I wanted it to end because I wanted to finish the book, but I also, like, really, really loved being immersed in this world, and absolutely just, it's so fantastic. It's so good. And I'm not much of a fantasy person, so it's, like, very much, like, realistic fantasy. I mean, I guess technically it's, like, urban fantasy. You could say, like, a little bit of more almost, I mean, it's not magic realism, because it's pretty much like fantasy. It's dealing with, like, fairies and magic, but it's, like, yeah, very much urban fantasy. Like, it's so much set in reality. It's almost speculative fiction, like, what if all of British history was the same, minus that there was magic involved. Anyway, so this is not only my favorite book of the month, it's, like, going to go in my favorite books of all time. So the next one I read was, and this was for something you could binge in 1 or 2 sittings, this was The Best Lies, which is the arc of the new book by David Ellis. I loved Look Closer. Look Closer was so good. That was one of my favorite reads last year. The thing is, this was good. And I think if you liked Look Closer, you'll like it. But it depends on what you liked about Look Closer. And so this is a little more like cop, like organized crime kind of stuff. So it's and I think I read one of his other books, and so he clearly is more in the, like, lawyers and cops and, like, that kind of world. And I love Presumed Innocent. I haven't read other Scott Turow books, but I mean, so if you like that kind of stuff, police procedurals or lawyer crime, or, like, even, like, John Grisham stuff, like, you'll like it. It was just, I think I liked Look Closer more because I liked it was more just, like, regular. I mean, I guess he was a law professor, and I forget what she did. But, you know, it was a little more of, like, a domestic personal thriller than this was. That being said, I mean, it, like, in some ways I was like, okay, I've seen this before because I had already read Look Closer. So I knew what some of the twists that were coming were going to be. But I think the twists were still really good. It had plenty of twists. There were things I didn't see coming. And so it's really solid, but, like, it just wasn't as good as Look Closer. So I guess that was my concern, is I liked it, but I didn't love it. So, I mean, I'd recommend it if you like Look Closer, but don't go into it expecting to love it as much. Maybe you'll like it more, but, I mean, for me, I just thought it was, like, a step down. But again, that's just more because, like, I think my preference is more on just, like, regular people than, like, cop, like, investigative crime kind of stuff. So, the third one, which was my Rickroll, which had to be something over 300 pages. I read Bunny because this was on my to read for the year. This was my second favorite of the month. I loved this book. I cannot begin to explain this book. It's about a girl who's in college. She's they don't say it's, it's a fake name, but it's basically Brown. But she's this, elite sort of New England Ivy, and there's like this group of women. I think she's a grad student, yeah, or a senior. But she's like, yeah, she's in like an advanced, I think it's like an MFA program. Right. So she's in this group of people that are in her class, basically in her sort of contingent, I guess, of like, and that's a group of women, and they're all sort of like it starts out and you kind of have a feeling it's almost like Heather's, where it's like sort of like the popular, perfect girls. It's funny though, because it's like in today's world, what those women would look like. And it's not necessarily, like, it's a little harsh, but it's not like, it's strangely feminist while also like kind of being like, these women are awful. But like, this is wild and it is bizarre, and I've never read anything like this. So I have no idea how to explain it. I have no idea if somebody would like it. It is weird as hell. It's like Heather's and Alice in Wonderland, but like also like if David Lynch did those. It's bizarre. It's so bizarre. I loved it. I was like so into it, but I was like, I don't even know what's going on. I feel like the best thing would be to just go into it with no preconceived ideas and just go with it. It's definitely unique. And it's not going to be for everyone. And I guess technically, I don't even know what genre it is. Maybe horror. But I don't know. I loved this book. It was bizarre though. So, I'm not even sure. Like I said, I don't know how to describe it. It's just interesting. All right. So the next one I read was for my safe bet, and this was The Vacancy in Room 10. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be a safe bet. I didn't actually really like this. I had read something else by Serafina Novoglass, and I thought it was pretty good. I just really hated the characters, so the entire time I was just like, these are awful people. I hate them. I don't care what happens to them. I hope everything horrible happens to them. So I just very much did not like the characters, and so was not able to like root for anyone, and I just kind of was like, these are horrible people. I hope they all die horrible deaths. So, not really my thing. I mean, the writing's fine. Like, the story's fine. Like, it's a twisty sort of mystery thriller. I think people like it. I can understand why people like it. I just hated the characters so much. I couldn't get past that. And then the last one was a book you've wanted to read forever, and this was The Chocolate War. And I had this on my banned book list. And then I was also like, yeah, I'm going to finally read this book because I grew up in the town next to the town where Robert Cormier's from. And he was like sort of like a local hero because he was, a famous author, and he was from nearby. And also his books were banned when I was a kid. And I remember, everybody talking about the challenges to the books. And I gotta say, this book was nothing like I expected. I knew what it was about. I knew it was about like a Catholic school where the kids are selling chocolate, but I guess I thought it was just sort of like I don't know. I thought it would be like kind of like Separate Peace, but that like there would be like a battle to win, like who would sell the most chocolate or something. And then like it would be like a bullying or a popularity thing. This was so dark. Like I was kind of like, this is like Lord of the Flies in a prep school. Like it's super nihilistic. I would say, yeah, it's way more like Lord of the Flies than A Separate Peace. but it's kind of like Separate Piece meets Lord of the Flies. I don't even know. Like, it was so dark. And I think, I mean, I liked it. It's definitely a little dated because obviously some of the stuff that goes on is clearly like 50s, 60s. I assume. I mean, it was written in like, I think the 70s, but I'm pretty sure it was like supposed to be in the 50s. Yeah, and like, I don't know if this is like a very unique, either regional or like American thing, but like, because it's very much about like these kids and then like the power they have, and how certain kids have certain power and they can get away with anything, and then like the hierarchy, and then they like have football and like, I don't know, but like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have read it. It's pretty famous, but like, wow, this book was so much darker than I was anticipating. And I read it and was just like, wow, this is very, very dark. And I mean, I still would not like support, banning it. There's like some talk of masturbation. There's talk of like, there's a lot of violence. But like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if kids would get it now. Like I said, I mean, I feel like it's like more like Lord of the Flies than any like coming of age book that I have read. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if like the timeline, like the period would be confusing to a lot of kids. But I mean, the ultimate principles are still there, right? Like, people have power and they like become very corrupt, and like even children. And so I don't know, it was very nihilistic. All right, so that was the wrap up of the 70s and 80s, and so now we will go on to the 90s and 2000s. So again, those were 10 of the books, and I mean, pretty solid mix. I didn't hate I didn't really like Vacancy and Room 10, but I didn't hate it. I just didn't like the characters. Like, the writing was fine and everything. So there was nothing like I hated out of this group of 10. And then I really liked the Truly Devious series. It wasn't perfect, and I explained why. I liked The Best Lies. I liked Something This Wicked This Week. I mean, I really liked, the only ones I didn't like at least were Knock Knock Open Wide and Vacancy and Room 10. And both were like solid writing. I just, for personal reasons, didn't like them. And then 2 of my favorites. So, I mean, this was a pretty solid group of 10 books though. So moving on to the 90s, we have You Can't Touch This, a book you don't own physically. Jump Around, a book with multiple points of view or multiple timelines. Cotton Eye Joe, a book with a redneck western country vibes. Tub Thumping, a book with a redemption story or persisting character. And Closing Time, final book in a series or the last book in an author's backlist. So this was a little more like hit or miss for me, this group. So the first one I read was Boy Parts because I've heard about this, everybody had liked it. It was really popular for a bit. And then I read Penance by Eliza Clark last year, and I loved that. And that was one of my favorites of the year. So I was really excited to read this. And this was, I think, on my personal to read, or if it wasn't on my personal to read, it was definitely on like a priority for me. I'm pretty sure it was on my personal to read. The thing with this book is, I did not like it very much, for very personal reasons. Like, it was not like Penance, although I would say that, like, a lot of the same conversations and themes are there, social media, sort of, like, there's definitely commentary on, like, feminism and on how women can be evil, like, and the torture of like women that they do to other people, obviously sexualization. So there's a lot of similar themes. I thought that Penance was handled better, and I also just liked the conversation and the topic better. This one reminded me, I mean, a lot of people called it like the girl American Psycho, and I would say it's pretty accurate. I mean, it's about a really, really awful person, and she does like horrible things, and she's just awful. But the reason I didn't like it was not that she was awful, and like, I mean, I wasn't like loving her. Even though I usually like unlikable characters, I thought she was a little too unlikable. But I was like, okay, I kind of get what you're going for. But she kind of builds in this love interest pretty early on. And then she essentially tortures him. Not physically, I mean, a little bit physically, but also, like, she, like, emotionally wrecks this guy. And I think the thing that was hard for me is, like, I have been in a relationship that was similar to, like, her relationship with him, but on his end. Just with someone who was clearly, like, a narcissist and manipulative and who really, like, messed with my head. And, like, it was and it's, like, something I'm still not totally over. And, I still, like, struggle to, like, make sense of. And so it was very hard because, like, I read a lot of books, and I know I, like, talk about this a lot. I read a lot of books about, like, violence against women or abusive relationships or, like, horrible things that happen to women. And, I've been through some of those things in my own personal life, and it doesn't really bother me. And I don't know, there's two things I'm kind of thinking that, like, why this one bugged me so much. First is I think that it's the emotional abuse that I think is really, really hard to read, because I feel like with the physical stuff or, like, sexual abuse and stuff, like, sexual assault, domestic violence, like, those kind of things, like, I can read and deal with, even based on my own experiences, just because I feel like they're not currently happening. They're not, like, and also, like, if you tell somebody, like, well, I can't say that. That's not true. I was going to say, if you tell someone you've been sexually assaulted, or you tell someone abuses you, usually people, like, care. That's not 100% true. But I do think, like, people, if they believe you, which, I mean, is whole social commentary, we can talk about that, systemic problems with that. But the thing is, if they believe you, they're still like, oh, that's a bad thing. But I think the challenge with, like, the kind of emotional damage she does to this guy, and that, like, I could, like, kind of have personally been there, is it's very, like, crazy making. And so it is hard to explain to anybody. And, like, because of that, it's like you're constantly like, did I imagine this? Am I overreacting? And you start to, like, carry a lot of that, like, pain, and you're constantly, like, digging away at yourself, and you see him doing that in this. And it was just really hard for me to read, like, the texts he was sending her and the messages and his questions, because I was just like, oh my God, I, like, feel like verbatim those are the messages I've sent. And I think the other challenge for me is that I don't think I've read a book where, it is about, like, abuse or sexual violence, where it's from the perspective of the perpetrator. Where usually, like, I'm reading it and it's the victim's experience, or it's, like, the cop or the investigator, or so even if there's, like, unlikable people, or if, like, we are hearing about the perpetrator, it's usually they're portrayed in a way that it's like, we're not supposed to like them, we're not supposed to relate to them. And I don't think we're supposed to relate to this character necessarily, but basically we're in her head. And I was like, I don't want to be in this head. I don't want to be here. So I think that's why, like, on a personal level, I just could not, like, I couldn't deal with it. Like, I read the whole book, and obviously, and it's good, but it's not something I can, like, I didn't love it, and I just felt, like, really sick after reading it. In a way I really don't experience. And I read a lot of crime fiction. I read a lot of murder and, like, horror. And, like, this, I think, is one of the few books that's made me, like, just feel physically awful after. I mean, I will generally, if something makes me feel that bad, I'll usually stop. But I really liked Penance, and, like, I like her writing, and I like what she's saying. I don't know. I just couldn't handle this one. So it's hard, like, because I would recommend it. It's good. It's just something I just didn't handle very well. So the next one, which I read, which is Multiple Points of View, was Beartown by Frederick Bachman, and I have never read anything by him. The reason I read this is actually because it came out pretty close to when my first novel came out, and this was one of the books that was used as like a comp for my book. And like there's similarities. I mean, mine is also set in a small town. It's also dealing with like, kind of the town dying, and like there's like all the hope is sort of pinned on like a couple people. It's not sports related. This is about like a hockey town in Sweden. But similar things. And then obviously like the sexual assault element, that was, that's similar. But this is more like mine was, is more focused on like one person and like the particular circumstances. And this is more about just like the town in general. And it's focused on many, many people. So basically, I mean, the sexual assault element doesn't even come in until like halfway through the book. So the book is really about just a small town. It's about a bunch of different people. It's like, honestly, it's a character study of a town and the people in the town. And then this event that happens and how all of these people react to it. And actually what it reminded me a lot of is, I mean, obviously, like, Jodi Picoult a little, because I, like, obviously for Ted's Circle, because, that deals with sexual assault. But also, I think it actually reminded me a lot of 19 Minutes, where, like, how a whole town that's affected by this, like, situation, this tragedy, how everyone handles it. Obviously, it's, like, a little different, but, I mean, it's similar where, like, you have people who, like, like, are focused on the sort of, like, pain of, like, the victim, and then there's other people who are angry, and, I mean, obviously, a school shooting is a little more, like, there's not necessarily, like, there's not, like, two sides of it, generally. It's like, okay, but, actually, what I think 19 Minutes does a pretty good job of is actually makes you feel a little bit bad for the shooters, as well as, obviously, everyone else. And this, I mean, actually, I think this does an okay job. I mean, like, it's not totally, I mean, the rapist is a rapist, but that makes you kind of think about, like the other factors that, like, may have kind of, like, contributed. I don't know. It reminded me a lot of, like, Friday Night Lights, but with hockey instead of football. Like the show and the book and the movie. So I like that. I really liked the book. I thought it was well written. I would say it was a little overly long. Like, it probably could have been, like, at least 50 pages shorter. And, I mean, some of it might be translation, but I did feel like there were, like, a lot of, like, just repetitive things. I was like, you've already told us this 3 times. Like, I don't need to know it again. Not, like, stylistically repetitive. Like, I mean, literally, like, yeah, we've been introduced to this character. We don't need their backstory for the 3rd time. So, again, that might be a translation thing, though. But overall, I really liked it. I thought it was really solid. I'm not going to go read the rest of them because, like, I don't really care that much about, like, most of the characters. They're not really very likable people, a lot of them. So, like, I'm not super interested in, like, the remainder of the... It's kind of, like... Also, like, I think sometimes when there's, like, a tragedy in a town and a story, by the time you have, like, a second story about the same people with, like, another sort of tragedy, it's just kind of, like, enough. Like, it's one thing Friday Night Lights, I think, did well as a show, but it also was only on for a few seasons, that, like, there were a couple tragedies, but, like, they didn't really overdo the tragedies. Like, it wasn't like, there was the accident in the first season, and then someone gets, like, shot in the second season, and then someone's murdered. Like, they kind of were smart about, like, not overdoing the melodrama. And so, like, I feel like by, like, the second book, I'd just be like, okay, maybe these people just have, like, a lot of bad luck, and at some point, like, too much drama for the same small town and group of people. That's why I, like, had no interest in, like, the second season of, like, 13 Reasons Why, because it was like, okay, horrible things happened, but, like, I mean, at some point, like, I think we wrapped it up. We don't need more tragedy, like, befalling these people. So, Anyway, so I'm not going to read it, not because, like, I just don't know that I need more of the story, but it is good. I did like it. Like I said, I didn't love it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a very solid 4. I mean, I really did enjoy it. I found it, very engaging. I was, like, excited to get back to it, so. Okay, so the third one, which is the Western feel, and I'm sure I'm going to hear about how I'm the dumbest person alive and my stupid girl brain cannot appreciate the talent, and of course I read, like, dumb books and I have no idea what good books are, and I don't appreciate literature because I hated this book. I hated Blood Meridian. I hated The Road, though, too. So, like, I just don't think Cormac McCarthy is for me. And it's not because I don't understand, like, it's not, like, I mean, it is kind of, I find it irritating that he doesn't use punctuation and, like, like, paragraphs, and it's just, and names and all that, like, it's a little annoying, but, like, whatever. I mean, that's, like, his gimmick, and, like, I mean, I've seen that work from other people, so I'm not, like, criticizing, like, the writing style. His writing is fine. I just do not care. Like, he writes a bunch of people I don't care about, doing a bunch of awful things that I don't care about. And I have no interest in reading more of it. So I'm not reading anything else by Cormac McCarthy. I own All the Pretty Horses, which I kind of want to read, but I'm also like, I know I'm just going to hate it because, like, I hated The Road. Like, I cannot explain enough how much I hated The Road. And I was like, I've seen this before. I love dystopian books. I like post-apocalyptic stuff. It was just empty to me. I did not care. I found the characters, like, just bland. It was repetitive. It was like, could have been a decent short story that just got dragged out. And this one is about even less likable people just being awful on repeat. And at some point, I was like, I just don't need this. And, like, oh, well, you're not appreciating how it's, like, about the nihilism of the West and the death of, like, the West and, manifest destiny, but the dark side. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. It's not that I don't appreciate it. I recognize what he's doing. Like, I don't care. I don't like it. And, like, I hate Lord of the Flies. Like, I can talk about Lord of the Flies because I've had to talk about it in a million classes, and I think there's, like, value in the concept, but I don't like reading it, and I don't like anybody in it. and I like the idea of it, but this, like, I did not like. And I don't like Quentin Tarantino. It reminds me of that. I feel like there's, like, a whole, like, group of literature, a new subgenre of, like, bro lit, and that's what this is. And I am not a bro, and I wonder if Cormac McCarthy had ever spoken to women, because apparently women don't exist in his world except to be, like, raped and, like, murdered or, like, off camera. And so, yeah, I don't care. I don't want to read more books about, like, dudes and the struggle of being dudes. Like, I do not care. So, I mean, obviously I read struggles of women, so, hey, maybe that's, my issue, but I don't want to hear about how I'm too stupid to appreciate the book. I just don't like it. And, alright, so the next one was an arc. This is the redemption of Morgan Bright. This was kind of weird. It was, like, really interesting, and then kind of not, and then I was kind of frustrated. So, basically, it's about this girl who goes to, like, her sister dies, and she wants to, like, find out what happened, because her sister went to this, like, facility for, like a mental health facility, and so she goes, and then she's, like, pretending to be this married woman because they help, like, women with, like, domestic psychosis, and, like, it's really hard to tell at first when the book is set, because, like, I thought it was set in, like, the 50s, because obviously everything, like, happens. It's almost like you should be, like, a good wife, but then it's also, like, futuristic, and then it's set now, and, like, I was trying to make sense of it, and you don't even realize this is happening until, like, 15-20% of the way into the book, like, because you think you're reading one character, and then you find out she's, like, the sort of, like, creation of this Morgan Bright character who, like, has like her own issues, and she's kind of like a terrible person, and her sister was kind of like a mess, and all of these things. And then like she created this persona, and now the persona is like real, and like, or is it, or is she a dissociative identity? And like, I don't know, like, and then it started getting into like supernatural stuff, and so it was a little weird, and it was a little too much for me, but like it was also sort of compelling in a weird way, even though I was kind of like not buying it at a certain point. So like, I don't know, it's like it's hard for me to recommend it because it's like kind of all over the place, but also like interesting enough to recommend. Like, I think it's good, and like it's weirdly like, I would say like I gave it I think a 3, but like for me I think I would say it's a 2. And this is a personal, like, really like, I know it's a dumb reason, but like, so it's about like the struggle of like women, right? And like how people treat women, and like how they diagnose women, and how like women in society have like certain obligations, and like the pressure on being like the perfect wife and the perfect mother. And so there's all these like things, but then there's all this like sexual stuff, and there's like kind of like almost abuse that goes on in this facility, and like they're like very anti-men, but then like, and some of it makes sense because you're like, yeah, men suck, and then you're also kind of like, oh, but also like the women kind of suck, and then the women are like really abusive to the other women. And so like the author's name is Chris, and so I wasn't sure like you know, if it was a male or female writer, but it is written by a man. And so like I kind of at the end was like, I don't know how I feel about a man writing like this concept with the level of sort of like sexualization and stuff. I don't know. So again, I think that's like a personal thing, like that I'm just, you know, I'm probably overthinking. So I'm not saying like men can't write women or women can't write men. I mean, I'm going to move on to like Riley Sager next, and I think Riley Sager writes great women. So I don't know. It's just, I think like, I feel like it maybe crossed the line as to how much I feel like, you know, like, I'm sure like if women are writing men, I mean, I guess they can write men too, but like, I don't know. I feel like women writing like sexual abuse of men, well, I don't know. I Loved a Little Life, and I think that's by a woman who wrote like gay men and, you know, a lot of sexual violence against men. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. Or maybe like the story just like wasn't compelling enough for me to not get hung up on that. Or maybe if like I loved it, I probably wouldn't have cared. So maybe I was just like overthinking it. So yeah, the next one is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. And I already kind of talked a little bit about this in my Riley Sager ranking. But I really liked this, and I get why people don't. And I really, really want like more people to like read it so I can talk about it, because I don't want to spoil it, but I also really want to like kind of explain my thinking, and see if they had the same experience, or if they see what I'm thinking, or if I'm overthinking it. So I don't know. I liked it, but I didn't love it. It's not my favorite, but I did like it a lot. Okay, so moving into the 2000s, this is our last era, is Who Let the Dogs Out? A popular book you don't understand the hype for. Smooth Criminal, a book featuring a heist or an assassin. Cupid Shuffle, a book you randomly generated from your TBR. Bad Day, a book featuring a character having a bad day or a bad time of it. And Sandstorm, a book with a desert setting. And this was also, I would say, a group that was like middle of the road, with some All right, so my book I didn't get the hype for was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And I'm like really into like, I do like dark academia. I mean, I like academic settings, obviously. I generally seem to enjoy those. But I don't like a lot of like heavy fantasy, so I was kind of like, eh. And I don't love The Magicians. I thought The Magicians was okay. I didn't really like the show, but I did think the book was okay. So I was like, well, I'll give it a chance. But no, I still do not get the hype. I hated this. It was like, I thought the writing was bad. Then there was like ghost rape and like unnecessary violence, but like it was just cheesy, but not cheesy. And then, like, a lot of it felt, like, pretentious, despite it feeling also like YA, even though it was technically adult. And, like, the character didn't make any sense. And, again, she had PTSD. She's another one of those who has PTSD when it's convenient. And then she's, like, also, like, a drug addict, but not a drug addict. But she takes the drugs because she doesn't want to, like, see ghosts or something. I don't know. It was just nonsense. I hated it. And the whole time, I was just, like... I felt like it was just like the author being like, aren't I quirky and cool, and isn't it awesome I went to Yale? And I'm just like, okay, shut up. I went to Yale too for like a summer, and you know what, like, I can describe the campus as well. I don't understand why I wouldn't just be set at Yale. I mean, and it's kind of interesting because I had read Bunny like not too far before this, like 1 or 2 books before this. And so Bunny is set on Brown's campus, also by an author who went to the college, and I just didn't get that same like pretentious like, aren't I special, I went to like this Ivy, and that was just kind of like what I got out of this. And then also like, I don't know, I don't get it. I don't get why everyone loves her writing. I don't think she's very good. Sorry, I know everyone loves her. I don't know, it was just nonsense. So yeah, I hated it. So then I read 0 Days by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware gets a lot of hate, and I don't really get it. I mean, she's fairly, like, I don't want to say she's generic. Like, her writing is, like, fine. Her stories are fine. I mean, they're not, like, super, like, thrilling and incredible and innovative. But, like, I loved The Lion Game. I liked It Girl a lot. And she went to Oxford, and I didn't get that, like, pretentiousness there. This one is about, like, a penetration tester, so it's kind of like an assassin, but it turns into, like, kind of like a heist assassin sort of, like, spy thing. I liked this a lot. Like, it was very different from, like, Ruth Ware's type of books, but, like, I don't know, I find her books fun. I enjoy them, and, like, they're, like I said, they're not necessarily, like, amazing writing, but I find them compelling, and they're fairly quick, and I feel like I've consistently enjoyed her books, so I don't get the hate. So the next one I read was Runtime. This was one that I randomly generated. I was excited to read this. This was actually going to be on my TBR for the year. And this was just bad. This shouldn't have been bad, because it's like a great concept. It's this woman who's an actress, and then she's like, for her whatever reason, she messes up, and so she like is trying to like get away from like her history of being like a problem, and she gets called to go to this film, and she decides she'd go even though it seems kind of sketchy, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and there's no cell service and whatever, and then like everyone starts to disappear, and it's a horror movie, and then it's like starting to mirror real life, and so it's like and it's in like the middle of nowhere in Ireland, and I was like, oh, this will be great, and it just wasn't. It was just like super predictable, super obvious what was going on, way too long. Like, this book should have been like a novella. Like, I don't know, it just got redundant. I was like, yeah, okay, she's alone and it's repeating the story, and it just, I feel like it's been done a million times and better. And what's weird is I really like this author. I mean, I've only read I think 2 things by her before, and I've liked them, so I don't know, I just, you know, they can't all be hits, right? So I'm not going to give up on her. I think I'm actually going to read another one of her books this month, so hopefully it'll pick up. It's May now, so then I read Dark Parts of the Universe. This was another arc. This is fine. This is like a YA sort of like gaming kind of mystery thriller, and it's about some boys, and like, I feel like this is a book that is 100% for the target audience, is probably a great book for them. And, like, I like YA, but, like, I feel like I'm not the target audience for a lot of YA. And so, like, this one I just was like, and I like gaming and everything, but I was just like, I just don't think this is a book that I am the audience for. So I was just kind of like, meh. But I also am not, like, I can't really pinpoint anything. I just didn't care, and it just wasn't for me. And I don't really think there was anything that, like, stood out to me that I was like, I disliked. It just was sort of like, this is probably a book that is just, I am not the market for. And then speaking of not being in the market, I read Holes, which was my last banned book, and I actually talked a little bit about this in a video already, and I didn't love this. I didn't really get it. Like, I mean, I got it. I knew it happened. I just don't get, like, the love for it. But, you know, again, I mean, I'm sure if I was in like a children's lit class, I was like explaining like how it was unique and everything else, that would be great. But like plot wise, I just did not care. But it was fine. It was an easy read. I mean, I would definitely, if you haven't read Holes and like you're interested, it's a super easy read, and I would definitely like suggest reading it because it is pretty like famous, you know, and like it's one of the most popular like YA kids, I guess like middle grade books. But yeah, like it was fine. So yeah, so those are the next 10. So obviously the 90s and 2000s were not as solid as the 70s and 80s for me, in terms of like the books I picked. So, all right. And then the last couple, I'm still reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for the readathon, read along. I saved this for the end because I was like, whatever, if I have to read it in May and I fall behind, I can fall behind. I mean, I've read them before. This is my least favorite of Harry Potter as well. So like, I'm still reading this. So we're into May now, and it's May 1st, and this is fine. I just, you know, I'm sure I'll finish it in the next few days, but I don't like this one as much. So I'm just like, I don't really care. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I love the Harry Potter books. I just kind of feel like the second one is like, there's some really good stuff, like, once you get into, like, Tom Riddle and the diary, but I'm like, it's taking forever to get there, and, I mean, it's good, because we're introduced to some other characters, and there are good, I mean, Dobby's obviously in it, and so there's some good stuff in this book, but I feel like it takes forever for anything to happen, and then it feels like a lot of it is just redundant, like, it's just like a repeat of the first book. And so I'm kind of like, in the later books, they get rid of, like, they stop with, like, heavy Quidditch stuff, and they don't have, like, all the sort of day-to-day class stuff. I mean, they have some of it that's important to the plot, but I feel like, you know, obviously because it's only the second one, it's kind of a lot more of, like, the same to kind of re-get you back into, like, reintroduce you back into the world. But, like, by books, like, 4 and 5, we're done with that, so... but I don't know, I just kind of am like, yeah, I know. So, like, right now, like I said, I've been reading it, but, like, nothing's really happened other than, like, we met Dobby, and we just have to, and, like, also, I don't think I care about, like, Gilderoy Lockhart. I think he's, like, one of the least interesting of, like, the dark arts professors, so it's just kind of, like, the Tom Riddle stuff is good, and that's about it, and then, like, a little bit of, like, the introduction of some of the other things, but... Anyway, and then the last thing I read for the month was this novella called The Country Will Bring Us No Peace. This was really good. I didn't love this as much as I thought I would early in the book. Like, I mean, it's a pretty short book, but I kind of thought I was going to absolutely love this, and I just really liked it. That being said, what I've realized is I am a big fan of is Canadian male authors who write horror that is actually like more like existential thought exercises, because like it reminded me a lot of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, except like obviously that's like my favorite book of all time, so clearly that one I think is better, but a lot of similarities in the fact that like it's very vague. You're kind of like, what is going on through most of the book. Most of the stuff that happens, you're like, is this real? Is it not real? What's going on? There's a lot of like metaphorical stuff. Yeah, and then it's horror, but it's more because it's unsettling rather than anything scary happening. But I'm not going to say more about I'm Thinking of Ending Things either, because I don't want to give it away, and I don't want to give the ending of this away. This I thought was really well written, though, and like I would definitely recommend it if like you're into that kind of stuff, because it's like a really solid read, and like the writing's really beautiful, and it definitely has like moments that made me think a lot, and yeah, so I think part of the thing too, the reason I probably like this a little bit less than I'm Thinking of Ending Things is like the overarching like theme and like struggle, like I guess the conflict in this one is, for me, is less relatable than the other one. So that's all I'll say. Which if you've read both, you know what I mean. So yeah, so that's a lot. But that was April. I mean, that was 22 and a half books, 20 or 21 and a half books. So That's a lot. I don't know if I'm going to get through that many in May. We'll see. I don't have any big long ones though, so it might be easier. But hopefully I won't have any that I hate as much. So yeah, I'm sure you're super interested because I'm barely staying awake. So all right, that was that. I will be back at some point. All right, bye.